Alright, welcome to a little tutorial on some fun microeconomics graphs. I'm actually exhausted. It's toward the end of the year. And we got an AP test coming up. So, I thought I'd run through some graphs here. So, I don't know how many rounds we're going to have here, but I'll probably break the video down into a couple parts, much like we did with macroeconomics. So, sit back and enjoy the ride, I guess. Again, most of these graphs, there are a lot of graphs in microeconomics that you might need to know how to interpret or to create for the AP exam. So I'm going to try to highlight these graphs below. Of course, the broader purpose of the exams, as I said there, is to be able to model economic realities. Anyway, and then use the graphs as a tool to understand the world and what we would expect to happen if given different scenarios. So it's not just for a test, but honestly, if you can use these graphs, you can use them as a tool to answer a lot of questions. If I were taking the test, I would be drawing a ton of these in the margins. So anyway, with no further ado, let's do the supply and demand graph. And actually, I'm going to end up doing this in a fair amount of detail. So let's make it a little bigger here. Most of this is probably review, so I'll just speed through it. Of course, in economics, we always do price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. And this is going to be supply and demand. Since we're in micro, we're probably talking about the market of a specific thing. And since we're boring, we'll call it the market for widgets. The law of demand simply states that at higher prices, I mean, it's pretty basic. At higher prices, all things being equal, you're not going to want to buy as many of a good. And so at lower prices, you're probably going to want to buy more of them. So our demand curve is downward sloping. Supply curve kind of works the opposite. As prices go up, we're more and more willing to supply goods and services. So at higher prices, we supply more of them. We often refer to it as just supply and demand, but really demand in this case, you're going to see me kind of flip-flop back and forth between these. Demand is the marginal benefit. How much would I benefit from eating one more cheeseburger? If the price was up here at, I don't know, $2, I might want to buy one cheeseburger. Because I feel like I would gain $2 worth of benefit from that. If the price came down to $1.50, well, that second cheeseburger I might be worth $1.50 to me, and so I'd be more likely to buy two of them because the benefit, the marginal benefit, the benefit of one more cheeseburger was diminishing. But at $1.50, there was enough benefit for two. Supply then is similarly marginal cost. If the price I can get is enough to cover the cost of me producing one more thing, then it's probably worth it. And of course, when I say cost, I do mean all costs, so I include opportunity costs in there. Then we need to break down this graph a little bit more. We have the all-important equilibrium, price and quantity. So I'll label that QE and PE. If we had a price that was too high, I don't know if I really want to draw this in. I'll come back to that with price floor and price ceiling. But if we have a price that's too high, then the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. So we have a surplus of goods, which will drive down the price. Just think of what happens when your favorite store has too many of something on hand. They mark it down on sale and the price comes down. Or think of I'm trying to think of a crappy basketball team or baseball team or hockey team. Let's see. Let's go with Clippers used to be the perfect one for this, but they're actually good now. Let's go with the Philadelphia 76ers. They've been pretty bad for a little while. If they set the price of their tickets too high, there are going to be lots of extra tickets available, and so then you'll be able to buy them cheaper than retail price. If you have a very popular team, and maybe the price is set too low, then the demand is going to be a lot greater than this quantity supplied, and you're going to have a huge shortage, which will ultimately drive prices up on the black market. The other thing that I really want to make a point between is that, all of these points are a quantity supplied. So if we have for instance, a shift in demand, like demand increases. Let me quick model that here with red. An increase is always that shift to the right. So maybe demand would increase because the item that's being sold here, the widget, became more popular. There were good ads or something. That would cause a shift of the demand curve, but that would only cause a shift along the supply curve. So if I was being technically correct, I would say demand increased in this example, and the quantity supplied increased. Supplied and increased, just the demand increased. And what we can look at that is that at any given price, we want more of these things. Of course, a decrease would be the opposite. A decrease would be a shift left, and so we would have a decrease in demand would result in a decrease in the quantity supplied. Similarly, if we had an increase in supply, there we go, that would be a shift to the right of the supply curve. That's a supply increase, and that would cause an increase in the quantity demanded, not an increase in demand, and a decrease in supply would look like a shift to the left, and it would be a decrease in supply and a decrease in the quantity demanded because of the new higher equilibrium price. Okay, I've said a lot about that. There's a few more things that we need to point out on this graph. This right here is that market efficient point. That's where marginal cost equals marginal benefit. That's kind of important. We'll come back to that. If we are not at that point, we're going to have some loss, some deadweight loss. So the other things that we need to define here then is that this area up here, above the price and below the marginal benefit curve, all of this is what we would call a consumer surplus. Why is that a consumer surplus? Well, that's because somebody up here was willing to buy one at this price, and they only have to buy it at this price down here. So they were willing to pay that, and they only had to pay that, so that's a great deal. Over here, maybe there was somebody who was willing to pay this much for whatever this good is, but they only had to pay that market equilibrium price, so they got a good deal. Maybe not as good of a deal, but a good deal, and so on. So if we add up that whole area, that's what we call the consumer surplus. Similarly, we have a producer surplus. That's this area underneath the price and above the supply curve. Again, their marginal cost was down here, for instance, but they get to charge that much because that's the market price. That whole area then is great for the producer, and so we call that the producer surplus. I think that's all we need to talk about that for now. Hopefully that's more than enough review on that. So let's talk about a couple things that would get us away from market equilibrium and what that looks like then. So let's quickly draw a supply and demand graph. Demand, supply, P, Q. I'm going to draw on the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity, and now if we put in a price ceiling, what that means is if it's an effective price ceiling, it means it won't allow the price to get all the way up to the market price. So if we put a price ceiling up here, well, it wouldn't really do anything. Up here, well, the price would be below, the market price is below that price anyway, so the ceiling wouldn't do anything. If we were to set a price ceiling down here, that'd be effective because the market price would naturally try to get up to this point, but the price that we're allowing right here is that price ceiling. So what happens when we do that? A few important things happen. First of all, the quantity supplied, let me do that actually in a different color. Let's do that in green a second. The quantity that people are willing to supply of the good, I'll put that QS, that's going to be the total amount that's available. So if like we limit how much you're allowed to charge on rent, we might limit the amount of apartments and such available. And so of course the producer surplus is a lot smaller than it was before. I'll label that as PS, producer surplus. If of course we're charging that price, if we're only providing that quantity, there were the price that we could theoretically have charged is all the way up here. In other words, there was somebody, all of these people were willing to pay at least this much, if not more. Well, those people with that price ceiling, actually another good example of this was if we put a cap on what gas prices were. Well, that means there are going to be people there are a lot of people who are willing to pay a substantial amount more than what is being allowed to be paid, so they might, God forbid, they might bribe somebody. They might pay somebody for a spot in line at the gas station. They might do something else, and so what you end up getting there is this kind of lost resources from non-market activities. So we'll call that section there lost resources. And then of course we do still have our, I'll mark that in red, our consumer surplus, but that's much smaller there because we spent a lot of our resources on getting a better space in line or something like that. So that's our consumer surplus now. And the all-important area that we haven't marked yet, and I don't have any more colors. Oh, nuts. I guess we'll do it with green again. No, we'll do it with black. The last area that we haven't really marked is this area here, which is stuff where we used to have some consumer surplus and where we used to have some producer surplus, and it just doesn't exist anymore because we are not producing that many, and so that is that infamous section we call a dead weight loss. Let's do the price floor here, and then I'll stop for a moment and probably do another video on as we continue it with taxes. So price floor, price ceiling, I'm going to start with the same graph that we do over and over again. Supply and demand with a price and quantity. Always label your axes. So we'll have our starting equilibrium, or our market equilibrium price. Make sure I press hard enough there. And market equilibrium quantity. And then let's put in a price floor. Just like we saw with the ceiling, if we were to put a price floor in too low, it wouldn't be effective. It wouldn't do anything because we're saying the floor says, hey, we can't go any lower than that. So if I put it down there, it didn't matter because the price wasn't going to be below that anyways. But if I put an effective price floor up here, I'll label that P sub F, that's our floor. And we say, hey, we are not going to let the price drop any further than that. Well, with that high price, we're getting a lot of the same sort of effect there. That high price is going to decrease the surplus, so the consumer surplus is going to shrink a lot. I should have colored these in, it looks prettier. The actual quantity that's going to be bought is really small. Quantity, I'll label it quantity demanded. The producer surplus, well, kind of depends on how we handle this. If the government decides to step in and promise to buy all these, we've got a huge surplus, and the government is going to have to step in and actually purchase a whole bunch, which means the government would have to purchase a huge amount at a huge price, and so you'd have a very, very large subsidy. The other option, of course, would be to pay a subsidy to reduce the supply, and you often see this in farming, where we get that farmers are sometimes paid to actually not produce on their land, so that can drive up market prices. Anyway, the total producer surplus might grow a lot, but we're going to have a huge this huge subsidy that we're paying for. And probably the most important thing that we need to draw on here is all of the deadweight loss. This is the area. This time it's on the other side of the equilibrium. And the reason we have a deadweight loss there is because we are producing stuff. I'm going to slide over a little bit here. Remember, our supply really is synonymous with marginal cost, and demand is marginal benefit. So we are producing stuff that is at a greater cost to us than the benefit we are receiving, and so we end up with this this big deadweight loss. All right, I think I'm going to pause it for now, and I'll come back to these videos. I'll come back to the videos when we'll deal with the taxes. Wow, told you I was tired. All right, come join me for part 2.